Hello, I'm Dale and these are my books. This video we're going to be talking about Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. It's obviously a classic and there are lots of videos on YouTube about this, so this is just my very personal take on the book. The first thing I should say is that I could only borrow this from my local library in a large print edition. So you can see that the print is really quite big. And if you haven't read a large print book before, I really would recommend it. Not only does it seem to be a little bit easier to read and to focus on, but also there is a sense of accomplishment because you're turning the pages much faster. So that was fun for me to do. So my take on Northanger Abbey. It's divided into two, essentially. There are two separate stories. One is the beginning, when the main character, Catherine Morland, is in Bath, which is a genteel city in England. And the second bit of the book is when she's in what is essentially a castle, Northanger Abbey. So two very distinct halves there. Catherine Morland is a 17-year-old girl, and she comes from a very ordinary background. Her father is a clergyman. She has 9 brothers and sisters. Growing up, she's a bit of a tomboy. And at the age of 15 or 16, she becomes almost pretty. And she has a fairly ordinary life. She's not particularly smart. She's not particularly beautiful. Just a very ordinary girl from a very ordinary background. However, she has neighbours, and this is an older couple who are very wealthy, and they decide to go to Bath. And the reason why this couple want to go to Bath is because the old man, Mr. Allen, is a bit gouty. He has gout, which is a disease normally associated with drinking too much alcohol and eating too much meat. And the reason why he wants to go to Bath is because he can take the waters. At Bath in England there are thermal springs, and it used to be the case that people would go there and they would sit in the thermal waters, or sometimes they would drink the water, and this was thought to give you some medicinal help in overcoming illnesses. So Catherine Morland goes with Mr. and Mrs. Allen to Bath, and for the first time in her life she's exposed to all sorts of social circles and dances and balls and hanging out with young people who are not relatives. And the novel is about the next couple of years of her life. The one thing about Catherine Morland is that she really likes to read Gothic romances. Not Gothic romances, but also Gothic horror stories. And she reads so many of them that her imagination gets a bit carried away with her. So in a little bit, this is a little bit like Don Quixote. Don Quixote is a character who reads so many books about knight chivalry that his brains dry up and he goes a bit mad. So there's that interesting parallel there between Don Quixote and Northanger Abbey. So she goes there and then goes to Bath, and then there's a host of characters. First of all, there's the Tilney family. Now, there are 3 Tilneys. There's Mr. Henry Tilney, who is the youngest brother and a love interest of Catherine's. There's Captain Frederick Tilney, who's the eldest son and not a very pleasant person. And there's the father, General Tilney, and General Tilney is the one who owns Northanger Abbey, and he's definitely a very unpleasant person. The youngest Tilney, Mr. Henry Tilney, he's a good guy, and also he has a brother, he has a sister, Eleanor, and Eleanor is a good character as well. So we have this family of the Tilneys. There are 4 of them, the 3 men and the 1 woman. 2 of the men are baddies, 1 of the men is a goodie, and the sister is a goodie as well. There's also Isabella Thorpe and her arrogant brother John. Isabella Thorpe is, both of them are baddies. Isabella Thorpe is a major character in the novel, and Catherine has a very close relationship with Isabella. They walk down the footpath arm in arm, and they're very close friends, and they love reading Gothic novels together. And one novel that they read in particular is the Mystery of Udolpho. Now, The Mystery of Udolpho is a real novel, and it was written in the 1790s, and it's regarded as a classic of Gothic fiction. If you can think of any Gothic cliche, the squeaking door, the painting which has a cover across it, the howling in the woods that have no particular source, the large castle or redeveloped abbey, the overbearing male relative, all of those Gothic cliches in the Mystery of Udolpho. So coming back to Northanger Abbey, just on the Mystery of Udolpho, if it's quite a long book, it's 700 or 800 pages. If you don't want to spend that time on it, there's a BBC radio dramatisation, which is 2 hours long, and it gives you all you need to know to appreciate the book and to realise what Gothic literature is. So, coming back to Northanger Abbey, you have Catherine, the main character, obviously. She goes to Bath and she meets these other characters. In reading the book, I found it really helpful to make notes, because not only do you have the three Tilneys, and you have to keep them separate in your head, the three male Tilneys, but there's also Catherine's brother, and Catherine's brother has a relationship with Isabella's brother. They're both at Oxford together, and they both become friends. And then there's a cross match where the Catherine's brother's friend is the friend of something else. So you need to write that down and get it really straight in your head, otherwise it ends up being a bit confusing. Unfortunately, two of these characters are called James and John, and for me at least, it would really help if authors didn't have similar characters with similar names. I would really have liked the other character not to have been called John, but to have been called Barry or something like that, because then you would understand, who's who, and it would take just less mental effort trying to remember the characters. So what they do is that they get together. There's a bit of toing and froing around romantic interests, and then the owner of Northanger Abbey, General Tilney, thinking that Catherine is very rich, which is not the case, but thinking that she's going to become one of the richest people in the county, invites Catherine to Northanger Abbey. And because Northanger Abbey is old and a bit Gothic, Catherine is, very enthusiastic about this. So she goes there, and her imagination gets carried away with her, and she thinks that there are secret documents which are hidden, and she has to uncover them, and she thinks that General Tilney perhaps killed his wife, which was not the case, but she gets really, really carried away. And then towards the end of her stay at Northanger Abbey, the general finds out the truth, that she's not rich at all, and violating every rule of hospitality, kicks her out immediately. So she has to go back not only to Bath, but she has to go back to her own parents' place, and that's a good ride away. I think it's a whole day's ride before her to get home. And then what happens at the end is that Henry Tilney, the nice guy, turns up in order to apologise, essentially, to Catherine. Sorry about my father, he kicked you out. But they get closer together and they get married and they live happily ever after, it would seem. So a couple of things about the themes. When I watched the movie version of this really helped me understand the novel. It helped me understand the financial motivation of so much of the characters, of so many of the characters. The general, for example, the general wasn't particularly rich, but he married a rich woman, and his wife died, and that's how he inherited Northanger Abbey. And he really wants the same for his sons and for his daughter as well. So when he thinks that Catherine is very rich, he's completely keen on a marriage between Catherine and one of his sons. But when he finds out that she's not rich, she gets kicked out. Similarly, the character Isabella is presented as being a bit of a gold digger. I'll come back to Isabella in a moment. And these financial motivations of the characters I really only got from watching the movie, which I did about 1/3 of the way from reading the novels. So that was all very interesting. This was discussed at a book club that I attended, and what I found is that I had a lot of affection for Isabella. There was a bit of a discussion about whether she needed the money, whether she needed to marry someone who was rich, or whether she just wanted to marry someone who was rich, whether she was relatively okay materially, but wanted to be rich because she liked material goods, or whether it was sort of a desperate plea, well, not a desperate plea, but a motivation for her to marry a man as rich as possible in order to secure her own financial well-being. I felt quite affection for Isabella. As a young woman in that socioeconomic class in England at the time, she didn't have much of a choice. She needed to marry a man who was well off simply in order to survive. They was tough circumstances. This is brought home really well, I think, by a scene in the movie, which is for free on YouTube, where Isabella is in bed with Captain Tilney, so the elder son. So Isabella thinks that if she sleeps with the captain, they'll get married, and she will be mistress of Northanger Abbey. What actually happens in the movie, this is not in the book, Jane Austen was not this explicit, but what happens in the movie is that it's clear that they've had sex together, and then Isabella says something extremely moving, I thought. I thought it was a heartbreaking scene. After sex, she says to Captain Tilney, "Are we engaged?" She thinks that because they've slept together, that means that Captain Tilney loves her and is going to marry her. And Captain Tilney hears this as he's walking out of the room, and he comes back a few seconds later, and instead of saying, "Yes, my love, we are engaged, we're going to get married," he says to her, "Just tidy yourself up." And I thought that was such a moving scene, and really shows the crushing power inequality, the crushing power imbalance between Captain Tilney as a man, the elder son, who's going to inherit Northanger Abbey, and Isabella. That compassion for Isabella, however, was just me. Everyone else at the book club thought that Isabella was just a gold digger and didn't deserve much sympathy at all. So that's about all. That's my take on Northanger Abbey. There's just one other thing. ChatGPT sometimes makes things up, but I find when I'm reading a novel like this that it really helps to talk to ChatGPT as if it were a person. And I can say, what would Catherine Morland think about this? When Catherine said this to Isabella, what did Catherine really mean? What is Isabella's relationship with her brother? What does Isabella think about affairs of the day? And these questions and the responses from ChatGPT really helps me come to know the characters. And it's really quite extraordinary. ChatGPT does get things wrong occasionally, but I find it's a really, really useful way to interrogate, to use that to that, use that odd word, the novel, to really get to grips with it and to really know the characters. The final thing, absolute final thing I'll say about this is that lots of people like Jane Austen, and there's been a lot of literary criticism about Jane Austen and about this novel. And one piece of literary criticism I came across this was an essay by an American woman who was into queer theory and all sorts of other things, and the title of this novel involves a word beginning with the letter M, and I don't think I can say this on YouTube, but the word means to self-pleasure oneself. And the title of the novel is Jane Austen and the M Girl. Jane Austen and the Emming Girl. And if you do a Google search, you can find this. And I find that level of literary criticism to be just absolutely bizarre. It's something that academics do. I think it really kills the novel. As a non-English person, as a non-English major who likes reading novels, it's just on a different planet when it comes to literary criticism. I like books because they're fun to read. I like the characters. I like them because they're funny, or I like them because they're moving. But when it comes to things like queer theory and looking at novels, I think it really destroys the soul of what the novel is about. The same person who wrote Jane Austen and the Emming Girl also suggests a number of characters in Northanger Abbey may be engaged in homosexual or same-sex attracted or some sort of queer relationships. For example, one of the characters in Northanger Abbey is a man who likes muslin. He knows about materials, and the suggestion there that this is really the author hinting that he's gay, I find that a bit improbable. I just don't buy that at all. So that's a slightly incoherent take on Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, and thank you for listening.